Ruth Avery lit the single candle on her store-bought cupcake with trembling fingers, 76 years old today, and the flame felt like the only warm thing in her small apartment. She'd bought the cupcake 3 days ago, marking it down in her careful budget between medication and utilities. At her age, these small celebrations mattered more than anyone understood. Her phone sat silent on the kitchen table. No calls from Daniel or Melissa yet, though it was already evening. Maybe they were planning something, she told herself, though the hope felt fragile as tissue paper. She closed her eyes and made a wish, the same one every year since her husband died, just to not be forgotten. Before she could blow out the candle, a sharp knock interrupted the moment. Through the peephole, she saw Calvin Pike, the building manager, holding an envelope. Ruth's stomach tightened. Calvin never brought good news. "Mrs. Avery, I need to discuss your account." She opened the door halfway, but Calvin pushed past without invitation, his eyes immediately falling on the single cupcake with its tiny flame. A smirk tugged at his mouth. "Birthday party? What can I do for you, Mr. Pike?" Ruth asked, stepping protectively near her small celebration. "Your rent increased last month," he said, consulting a clipboard while eyeing the cupcake. "Elevator maintenance assessment, hallway renovation fee, updated security deposit. You're 3 weeks behind on the new amount." He handed her a paper covered in charges she'd never seen. "You owe $840. I need it by Friday." Ruth's heart sank as she studied the numbers. Her careful handwriting filled a dozen budget notebooks, every expense tracked, but these charges had never appeared anywhere. "Mr. Pike, I paid my regular rent. I never agreed to these additional fees." "Building improvements cost money, Mrs. Avery. Everyone pays their share." His gaze drifted back to the cupcake, and without warning, he reached over and pinched out the candle between his fingers. "You might want to worry less about parties and more about your bills." The casual cruelty of the gesture left Ruth speechless. The room felt darker, colder. "I need time to review these charges. Some of them don't make sense." "Friday," he repeated, heading for the door. "Or we start eviction proceedings. Happy birthday, by the way." The door slammed behind him, leaving Ruth standing in her dim apartment, staring at the smoking wick. She tried calling Melissa first. "Mom, I'm swamped at work," her daughter answered without greeting. "Can we talk tomorrow?" "It's my birthday," Ruth said quietly, "and there's a problem with my apartment." A pause. "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been buried in this project. Happy birthday. What's wrong with the apartment?" Ruth explained about Calvin's surprise visit and the unexplained fees. "Mom, did you read your lease renewal carefully? These old buildings have maintenance costs. Maybe you missed something in the fine print." "I read everything, Melissa." These weren't included. "Look, building managers don't just make up charges. You're getting older, and sometimes details slip by. I'll try to call you later tonight, okay?" The line went dead. Ruth stared at her cold cupcake, the black wick now just a reminder of interrupted wishes. Thursday morning found Ruth at the Housing Authority office, her lease and Calvin's fee sheet spread across a metal desk. The clerk, a tired woman named Janet, examined the papers with practiced efficiency. "These additional charges should have been disclosed 30 days in advance," she said, pointing to city code. "This timeline doesn't look right." "What can I do?" Ruth asked, hope flickering. "File a complaint. It takes 6 to 8 weeks for review." "I need to pay by tomorrow or face eviction." Janet's expression softened. "I'm sorry. The legal process takes time." Outside the office, Ruth sat in her car and called Daniel. "Mom, I'm in back-to-back meetings," he answered. "Is this urgent? My apartment, I might lose it." "What happened to your emergency fund?" Ruth closed her eyes. "What emergency fund?" "My pension barely covers monthly expenses." "I thought you had money from Dad's life insurance." "That was 5 years ago, Danny. Medical bills, home repairs, rising costs." "Look, I'll call you tonight. We'll figure something out." But Thursday night came and went without a call from either child. Friday morning arrived gray and unforgiving. Ruth had managed to gather $400 by selling her wedding ring, the one piece of jewelry she'd kept through everything. It wasn't enough. At 9 sharp, Calvin knocked again, this time with a deputy sheriff and a locksmith. "Do you have the money, Mrs. Avery?" Ruth held out the cash she'd scraped together. "I have $400. I can get the rest if you give me more time." Calvin didn't even look at the bills. Full payment was required. "Here's your 3-day notice." He handed her an eviction notice. "You have until Monday to pay in full or vacate." "Mr. Pike, please. I've lived here 8 years. I've never been late on actual rent." Times change, buildings change, people need to adapt. As he turned to leave, he paused at her kitchen table where yesterday's cupcake still sat, now stale and sad. "Next time, maybe spend your birthday money on rent." Over the weekend, Ruth discovered the true scope of her isolation. Her children, when she finally reached them, seemed more concerned about her declining judgment than the possibility she was being cheated. Legal aid had a 2-month waiting list. Her small savings account held barely enough for groceries. Monday came with the deputy sheriff and Calvin's locksmith. Ruth packed her life into 2 suitcases, medications, important documents, the photo of her grandchildren taken last Christmas. As she locked her door for the final time, her neighbor Mrs. Chen appeared in the hallway. "Ruth, what's happening?" "I'm being evicted. Some fees I couldn't pay." Mrs. Chen's face hardened. "He did this to the Johnsons last month. Same story. Sudden fees, impossible deadlines." "What happened to them?" "They moved in with family in another state." Mrs. Chen glanced at Calvin, who was photographing the key handover. "This isn't right." The Riverside shelter smelled like institutional disinfectant and desperation. Ruth signed forms and received a cot assignment in a room with 12 other women. Her bunkmate, Maria, had calloused hands and understanding eyes. "First time?" Maria asked gently. Ruth nodded, unable to speak, past the tightness in her throat. That night, lying on a thin mattress surrounded by strangers, Ruth thought about her interrupted birthday wish. She'd wished not to be forgotten, but here she was, forgotten by her own children and erased from her home by a man who'd snuffed out her candle like it meant nothing. The next morning at breakfast, Ruth found herself at a table with Maria and several other residents. The conversation naturally turned to housing struggles. "Slumlords," said Tom, a veteran who'd been homeless twice. "They push out long-term tenants with sudden fees, then rent to new people at higher rates. No deposits to return, no moving costs." "Happened to my sister," added Maria. Building manager claimed elevator repairs, charged everyone $800 overnight. Elevators still broken 6 months later. Ruth looked up sharply. 800? When she described Calvin's fees and timeline, the table went quiet. "Calvin Pike?" Tom asked. "Same guy who owns the building on Oak Street." Maria nodded grimly. "He's got a system. Targets seniors and people on fixed incomes. Most can't fight back." "What can people do?" Ruth asked. Tom leaned forward. "There's this lawyer, grew up around here, Evan Cole. Takes tenant cases, works on contingency. Problem is, he's swamped." Ruth felt her first spark of hope in days. How do I reach him? Evan Cole's office occupied the cramped second floor of a converted brownstone. Ruth climbed the stairs slowly, pausing to catch her breath. The receptionist, Sam, had purple hair and a warm smile that reminded Ruth of Melissa at a younger, kinder age. "I need to speak with Mr. Cole about an illegal eviction," Ruth said. Sam took detailed notes as Ruth explained her situation. "This sounds like Pike's standard operating procedure," Sam said. "Evans handled 3 cases against him this year. The problem is proving improper notice and documenting the pattern." Ruth pulled out her lease and Calvin's fee sheet. Sam examined them carefully. "These dates don't comply with city requirements. Rent increases over $50 require 30 days written notice." She looked up. "Evan's in court all week, but this is exactly the kind of case he takes. Can you come back Thursday at 2? Thursday afternoon, Ruth sat across from Evan Cole in his cluttered office. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 40s, with tired eyes and the rumpled appearance of someone who worked too many hours for too little money. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out a legal pad. Ruth walked through her story: the interrupted birthday, Calvin's surprise fees, the impossible deadline, her children's dismissive response. Evan took notes and asked pointed questions about timelines and documentation. "These charges," he said, studying Calvin's paperwork, "they're not in your original lease. And this timeline clearly violates city ordinances. Can you help me get my apartment back?" "I think so, but Ruth, may I call you Ruth? Even if we win, this takes time. Legal processes move slowly, and Pike will fight back." Ruth's heart sank. "I can't afford months of legal fees. You don't pay unless we recover damages. That's how contingency cases work." He leaned forward. "But I need you to understand, this could take weeks or months. Can you be patient?" "What choice do I have?" Ruth asked. Evan smiled slightly. "That's exactly the right attitude. Pike counts on people giving up, but you're not going to do that." For the first time since Calvin had knocked on her door, Ruth felt someone was truly listening to her. The legal process moved with frustrating slowness, but it moved. Evan filed emergency motions, challenging the eviction timeline and fee structure. A judge agreed to preserve Ruth's belongings and scheduled a hearing. Ruth remained at the shelter, but now she had representation and hope. 6 weeks after her ruined birthday, Evan called with news. "We won." The judge ruled Pike violated proper disclosure procedures and charged illegal fees. "Your eviction is reversed, and he owes you damages for displacement costs." Ruth sat down hard on her shelter cot. "I can go home?" "You can go home." The day Ruth returned to her apartment, Mrs. Chen was waiting in the hallway with a small cake, chocolate with pink frosting, and a single candle. "I thought you might want a do-over," she said, hugging Ruth carefully. "I also documented everything Pike did wrong. Your lawyer said it might help other tenants avoid the same treatment." Ruth unlocked her door to find her belongings exactly as she'd left them. The apartment felt different somehow, smaller but more precious, ordinary but miraculous. She lit Mrs. Chen's candle and made the same wish she'd made 6 weeks ago, but this time it felt less desperate and more like gratitude. Her phone rang as she was settling back in. Melissa's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, I heard about your case. I owe you a huge apology." "You do," Ruth said simply. "I should have listened when you tried to explain what was happening. I should have helped instead of assuming you were confused or making mistakes."